How are you?
You in charge of check tonight? Okay, so I don't know what do you want to use this paper or this card? So don't record that. I did. Did you get your way?
We would like to begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. So please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome everyone. It's wonderful to see all of you here tonight. We're very excited about our first presentation by our students. I just want to say congratulations to our students over at the high school for cabaret night. And I will leave all of that business to the end. Dr. Gallagher?
Thank you, Mrs. Conway. This is like one of the most exciting nights of my life because those of you who I work with know that I've been dying to have this program come to Long Beach for like the past 3 years. And I am so excited that we actually have students who are going to state in just a few months. And I have worked with these guys a bit. We've talked about their experiments. They're awesome. And so I will turn it over to our wonderful science director, Ms. Jersey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Jersey. I'm the Long Beach Public Schools Director of Science. I'm excited to share with you guys tonight the wonderful work done by our team of 6th graders who are officially a part of Mission 17 of the Student Spaceflight Experiment Program. The goal of SSCP is to give students an opportunity to participate in America's space program. They became architects of a project that's going to be conducted on the International Space Station. And here with me tonight are the students whose projects made it into the the 3 finalist projects. These 3 projects were chosen by a national review board composed of scientists, researchers, engineers, and STEM-related professionals. When I say your name, please raise your hand. Frank Page, Nathaniel Kaplan, Gregory Seifert, Jackson Spitz, Juliana Urego, Megan All, Isabella Basil, Naraya McBride, Adrian Stellis, Isabella Corritor, Tommy Corning couldn't make it here tonight, Joey Isola, and Isaac Hiroshami also couldn't make it here tonight. I'm going to hand it over now to Megan All.
All 6th graders worked on a microgravity research question in some capacity, and most students wrote research proposals which were submitted for review by our local Step 1 review board.
The proposals were outlined in clear procedures that will take place simultaneously in space and in our classrooms. The results of the experiments experiences would be compared to see if a weaker gravitational force effect of the result.
We are also holding a mission patch art design contest with our art departments and K to 5 STEM team. One winning patch from grades K to 5 and one from 6 to 12 will fly to the ISS and return with a certificate.
SSEP is currently updating the community pages. Here you will find information on all communities participating in Mission 17. You'll see Long Beach is one of the 3 school districts from Long Island.
The project selected for spaceflight will examine how microgravity affects the growth of oyster mushroom spawns. In these pictures, we're testing the ground control to see what would happen on Earth under the influence of our gravitational field.
SSEP requires the experiment be done in a mini lab, which is a flexible tube approximately 7 inches in length and ½ inch wide.
Inside this tube, we will place a tiny test tube, which will serve as an agar sling, providing food for the mushrooms. In another section, we will place formalin, which is formalized solution that will stop the growth when the mini lab is ready to come back to Earth.
There were also other constraints to consider too, like the astronauts can only work with the mini labs on certain days and perform certain actions for a specific length of time.
This is our group doing initial testing, putting the liquid mushrooms inside the test tubes on the agars. Here's our group making observations of our first trial.
There was a great article in Sunday's Newsday on February 5th, which is linked in this presentation in case you didn't see it in the paper.
Our work for this began last summer. It truly was a collaborative effort with some folks not pictured here. Science co-teachers, English teachers, librarians, and literacy director. Thank you to the board and central administration for giving this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Now we'd all like to share some reflections, starting with my friend and lab partner, Maven All. Hi, I'm Maven All, the investigator of the team, and here are my teammates.
Lorraine McBride, the researcher.
I'm Isabella Basil, co-investigator, and we worked on the project on the effect on microgravity on biodegradable plastic with the help of Miss Tercy, Miss LaPena, and Mrs. Nurse. SSEP stands for Student Spaceflight Experiment Program, and this is a big science research program that we had to do as a team. This problem we wanted to solve with plastic is happening worldwide. We thought of this idea in our science class. In September in our science class, we researched all about the biodegradable plastic. We also researched in the school library using the database to find important information. We chose plastic and enzymes because the plastic issue on Earth is crazy. 24.4 trillion pieces of macro and microplastics are in the ocean, and 85% of landfills are filled up with plastic, which is producing dangerous gases. We wanted to see if enzymes would break down the plastic quicker in space than here on Earth to do our part in helping the environment. We found enzymes called PETase and started to do deeper research. We found out that this enzyme can break down particles in plastic, which inspired us to use it to make our experiment more helpful to the plastic issue.
The greatest part was when we had thought of our idea for our project because most people chose seeds and we had thought of something totally different. The hardest part was not being able to find enzymes that we were able to obtain. Another hard part was when we had to write an essay together. Something hard about the research was when we had to go to all these different sites looking for information.
Hi, I'm Adrian, the principal investigator of my team. We participated in the lime bean experiment for the SSCP. We did this in the 6-month science room, ELA class, and the library. We started our project in September and finished it in November. All 6th graders will present their work at the Science Symposium in March, and we will all get the chance to do the lab of the project selected for space.
We learned that a middle schooler can have their project get sent into space. It would have sounded crazy if someone told me that when I was younger. We also learned how to keep our cool and have patience with each other. We also learned a lot about lima beans. I'm Joy Asola, the researcher of the lima bean experiment with all of Mrs. Shementi and Miss Callahan. The successes of our group was being able to work as a team and being chosen as the finalists. It was nice to know that a project that we created had the chance of getting into space. Another success was figuring out good information and taking turns sharing it with each other. Who wouldn't learn? The Who was at first all of the 6th grade, but soon it turned into my group being selected for spaceflight. My group included Frank DePace, Nathaniel Kaplan, Gregory Siefer, Jackson Spitz, and me, Juliana Uraga. Frank, Nathaniel, and Jackson were our researchers. Gregory was the co-investigator, and I was the principal investigator. The what is the project? How does microgravity affect the germination of oyster mushrooms? Where will our experiment be going? Our experiment will be going on the ISS Mission 17 to outer space, where it is going to be tested on by astronauts.
The rocket ship is going to launch on June 13th to the 15th. The experiment is going to start 2 days after the ISS, and during the experiment to expand astronauts' spaceflight. Also, in oyster mushrooms, there are vitamins that help with our immune system and can help keep astronauts below the same.
One of our challenges was to change the proposal a lot and make edits, which probably the most we've ever written.
Some of the things we've learned during this experience was that mushrooms can be very, very small and be turned into a liquid. That we can actually succeed in sending a project to space, and that we can grow mushrooms in space and other planets.
These are some successes I had. My greatest success was choosing this group. Another great success was being the chosen group for spaceflight. Something to talk about on an interview for college and a job. Writing a very long essay before me.
And none of this could have been done without support of the board, central, the teachers, fabulous. I cannot even begin to say thank you enough to Ms. Shementi, Ms. Dean, Mrs. Nurse, Ms. Callahan, and Ms. Lapena. They worked tirelessly, invented things, created the most wonderful Canvas presentations, student-friendly. Dr. Radice with her graphic organizer for the research proposal. I mean, there is just so many folders on Google Drive with work that was created from September forward, and I just thank you. You guys are fantastic.
Yes, and just before questions and comments for the board, a big, big thank you to Ms. Tursi, who we could not. Questions and comments from the board? Dr. Ryan?
You know, it's so great to see student product, good to see the results of your work. So I want to commend you students for stepping up and for accepting the initiative, and also for coming out tonight to let us see firsthand what you're doing. We've been notified of this from its inception. We've been following it since its launch. And we're certainly proud of you in terms of what you've done and what you'll continue to do, because we expect great things from you. So thanks for coming out tonight. Thanks for stepping up. Thanks for showing initiative. Thanks Ms. Tercy and all the staff. Nice to see Ms. Nurse here and the other teachers. So thank you very much.
First of all, you guys are all way smarter than me. So I am blown away. I love what you've done. Thank you for presenting it to us like that. Brian said, I think most importantly, when you guys look back on your education, you're not going to remember a lot when you're our age, but you will most likely remember this. And that makes me happy because I sit here on the board and like Doc said, we heard about this from the inception, all the hard work that went into it, and now here you are presenting it, and I'm glad that you let us be a little bit of a part of it. So hold it with you forever. It's really amazing.
I'd like to echo the sentiments also said prior by Dr. Ryan in this case. Two things, we were faced with this opportunity for you guys, and we weren't sure how it was going to end up, and it brings a lot of pride to us and the district, and not only did you guys enjoy yourselves and learn, but you also actually got recognized and were like leaders in the whole program, so we're really proud of you for that. And on top of that, if we do, in the event, get our greenhouse going and set our real farm to table initiative, will you be our consultants if we can start growing vegetables? All right, cool, appreciate that.
I really want to commend all of you. You came up in front of the podium and you spoke to all of these adults that which you really did amazing. And I have to tell you, your work is very inspiring to us, and I'm sure to all of your parents. Because it's not every day when you see children like you who are putting so much time and effort and so much reflection into your work. I want to thank you for all of that, and I want to say that you've definitely been a highlight for this week. So thank you. And Ms. Tercy, the teachers, thank you so much for all of your hard work, and parents, thank you so much for all of your support.
And now, you get to take your parents out for a special Valentine's treat. Orders of the superintendent.
Hershey's Kisses.
Yeah, take some kisses to go, and we're going to have a little bit of a break while we switch presentations. So good luck, and thanks again.
Nice job, girl.
Thank you.
Bye. You're right in front of me.
What?
Is there one for me?
What about?
I am not. Yes,
Yo, what's up, bro? All right, hold on, man. I heard his name and I was like,
All right, great job, Nathaniel. Wonderful job. Thank you.
Well, yes.
See you guys tomorrow.
More than you know.
Bye, Natasha.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, ready. So this evening, we're going to talk a little bit more about capital projects. It's a follow-up to our previous presentations. And we'll start with the first slide, which is the recommendation of the Board Capital Project Subcommittee. The subcommittee recommends that the district wait until at least the fall of 2023 for a public vote on the capital project proposal funded, whether it's through the Capital Reserve Fund partially or a bond. Now, again, the reserve fund is money we have on hand in our capital reserve fund, and the bond would be a publicly financed situation for the long term. Although the total cost of the proposed capital program will not require any additional tax levy to support the list of projects, because what we're saying is it's tax neutral, meaning that it wouldn't add any additional tax levy to support this. The subcommittee wants to wait on the public vote, just out of to avoid any possible confusion with the upcoming district budget vote in May. There's some concern there that, perhaps there would be some confusion, no matter how hard we try to just get the message out to the community that just by voting in favor of a bond, it's not going to increase the tax levy at all, because it would backfill, and you'll see a little bit later in the presentation, because it would backfill debt service that's falling off in the future. If the district moves forward with the recommendation of the board subcommittee of a vote in the near future, I suggest that we use the funds in the capital reserve fund, again, funds that we have on hand, to offset the total amount to be financed through the bond. So we have about $5.2 million in our capital reserve account right now. And let's just say for argument's sake, the board decides at a future time that we're gonna go out for an $85 million bond to support projects, or $85 million worth of projects, let's say. We can say, well, 5.2 million is money that we can use, we have on hand, we still need public approval for it, but we have it on hand, and then what we're asking to borrow maybe is 80 million or 79 million or something of that sort. So I think it's helpful if we do go forward with the bond issue to say, well, we do have some money on hand, we're gonna use towards it. So please just, in the first part, accept, approve the use of the funds, and then after that to approve the long-term financing through a bond. A future ballot could be structured so that we either have 2 or 3 propositions, right? So if it's 2 propositions, it would just be the approval, like I said, of this capital reserve account, and then of whatever's remaining for the bond. But we can then take that other portion and split it up into 2 subsets, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. So we have some options, and at the end I have a slide where I say questions for us to consider, which is the recommendation to the full board. I'd like the full board to, at a certain point, make a decision about whether to wait on the bond and accept the recommendation of the subcommittee, but we still need to do some thinking on these issues. And as I go through some of the highlights of the presentation, I'm gonna emphasize certain things that from now until we go forward with a possible bond, I'd like the board to consider, because there are a couple of strategic decision points that I'd like for us to think about. We have some time if the board wants to wait, but it's still things we need to think about. So we talked a little bit in past presentations about 2 really exciting educational enhancements that we're still developing. This in-house science research lab at the high school and a marine technology facility. So you'll see in the presentation, there's not even a placeholder there yet. We have some visits upcoming. We know we want to go forward with that, but we do need to develop that in terms of the scope of work as well as the cost. You'll see that we do have a rough estimate as a placeholder for the cafeteria that we've been talking about. We got a proposal already of about $500,000 to just do the equipment to change the service line, but we want to do more than that, and we're still waiting for some of those designs to come back about what those costs are, but there is a placeholder there. I was asked at the last presentation if there's a way that we can further categorize some of the work into maybe 2 different categories, such that's an educational upgrade and others that are just of a maintenance nature. And I tried. You'll see as I go through a couple of the line items here, that it's somewhat difficult to make some of those distinctions because you could argue, oh, well, that's really a maintenance item, or no, that's something new as an educational upgrade. But I did my best in terms of trying to categorize those 2. And you'll see the items that are in this educational upgrade category are colored in terms of those line items to distinguish between the others. So I came up with, just again, roughly about 43 million of line items in here that you could arguably say is an educational upgrade, and about 40 million here that, again, arguably you can say is maintenance. And when we talk about the ventilation and the cooling elements of that, it does sometimes, you're making some distinctions that are maybe artificial, but I'm going to try to explore that in this presentation this evening as well. So this total here, these specific building numbers are pretty much the same as the last presentation. That hasn't changed, but I did take out the public library, and I did that for a very specific reason, is I want to review again with our architect and our director of facilities, those items that the agreement between the library and the district outline as part of infrastructure. Because there may be, again, it's arguable, something that maybe the library should pick up on the list that I presented last time, so I want to go over that again. So it's not part of this discussion here. Overall, it was about 1.4 million for the library, but some of that may be items that we could say to the library that, based on this agreement, I really think it's your maintenance and not necessarily the district's maintenance. So I left it off of this presentation this evening. So here we have the high school, and you see here, very straightforward. We talked about in-house science research lab, marine technology, very clearly an educational upgrade, as well as this cafeteria reconstruction, the FACS reconstruction, baseball, softball fields. Again, somebody may say, well, that's part of maintenance, because then it eliminates the maintenance elements of baseball, softball. But in terms of putting in turf and overall, again, I classified it in as an upgrade. But for some of these, like I said earlier, you could argue that maybe a piece of it is maintenance, but I tried to come up with this categorization, but again, it's not always an exact science. This locker room and construction, I also put in that category of an educational upgrade. And then the rest here, you'll see that's in not colored, is what we, very clearly vinyl tile flooring or interior doors, or the ceiling replacement is maintenance. Where this maintenance comes from, again, is a building condition survey that our architect does every 5 years, and they go through all of our buildings, and they itemize everything that they see. They go, oh, that's gonna need to be addressed. Oh, yeah, that's gonna need to be addressed. The floor needs to be addressed. Something in the bathroom needs to be addressed. Not that it's an emergency, because if it was an emergency, we would say, okay, we need to deal with this right now. But it's something that you need to plan for. It should be part of a 5-year facilities plan. Want to make sure everybody's aware that all of these cost estimates include 18% for soft costs, which are architect and engineering fees, the construction management, the testing, environmental testing if we need to test anything, the legal fees, the printing, and some, about 8% built into this 18% is if we come up with something we weren't expecting. There's a little bit of a buffer there for us to then do whatever is required because, oh, we just opened up the ceiling, we just opened up a wall, look at what we found, it was unexpected, and it helps to cover those unanticipated costs. At Lido Elementary and Long Beach Middle School, and the reason why I have it separated out in this way is because it's one complex that we're in. There's one head custodian here, there's one building number when it comes to the state, but very clearly 2 different schools. So I try to separate it out in terms of the 2 different schools, but when we talk facilities, it's one site. It's courtyard reconstruction, the outdoor learning, very clearly an upgrade, perhaps some of the maintenance of the courtyards. If we do any kind of turf in those areas, of course, would be eliminated. Reconstruction of the fields, what we're calling the west, on the west side, stage removal. So what they had asked here was they don't really use the stage in the back of Lido Elementary, and they said it would be a much better use of space for the students. We just took the stage out because they really like to have more space to play. So again, it doesn't need to be repaired. They're using it, but it would upgrade the educational experience for the students. Here's an example. You see here ventilation systems and cooling. So Lido Elementary and Long Beach Middle School, they both have mechanical ventilation, which means that fresh air flows into the building in the different classrooms mechanically. There's a way that they can control how much air comes in and out through different vents and systems. There are also areas in both of these schools that do have air conditioning because of whether it's this wing, what we call the B building, this whole pre-K wing all has air conditioning, because when we built this wing, part of it was to have air conditioning, so all our kindergarten classrooms and our pre-K classrooms here have air conditioning. So does the nurse's office, the main office, as well as over in the middle school, the main office suite, the library, so it's just cooling the rest of that building. And it's clearly an upgrade because there's nothing about maintenance in that. It's just providing cooling to all the other spaces. Some examples here, I'm not going to go through every one of them, but I think you understand the difference here. Sidewalk and curb replacement, right? Maintenance item. We can see that it needs to be addressed as we did that building walkthrough. The cafeteria and kitchen floor replacement, replacing the tiles. Again, we noticed that the building walkthrough really needs to be addressed as part of this 5-year plan. At Lindell, you see only 2 items that I have highlighted on this slide that would be an upgrade in terms of the educational program. The exterior bathroom. It's something that would sure benefit the students who are outside, our community groups that use their facilities, but it's not that we have one there already that needs to be repaired. In terms of the playground, they obviously have a field, they have a playground, but when we met with the principal and her administrative team said that it would really enhance the overall experience for the students and the community if we did some sort of an overhaul of the playground there, especially some of the play equipment. This kitchen sewer line replacement, very clearly a repair item here that we have to address. But again, not an emergency, but we should plan to do it within the next 5 years. At East Elementary School, The big upgrade there in terms of educational upgrade is the athletic field and the playground. That was a specific request again by the administrative team. And I just want to talk about this item here for a minute, this ventilation. And I talk a little bit more about it in the slides that are coming up. East Elementary School is the only building that we have that doesn't have mechanical ventilation. So I have it as a maintenance item because when you talk to the architect says, listen, if we want to have mechanical ventilation in terms of not just relying on windows, which is really a maintenance item in terms of, you know, safety, health and safety of the building, it's not really an upgrade in that sense. So I had asked him, I said, is there a way that we can break this figure out? I don't have that detail yet, but when you run the pipes to provide mechanical ventilation, it's 2 pipes for the hot water, 2 pipes for the cold water, right? It's called a feed and a return. So we were talking about it, okay, so we're putting in this mechanical ventilation. You're having a contractor go into the building, they're opening up the ceilings, then they're going in and they're putting in the feed and the return for the hot water, so we have ventilation, that part of it. But now are we gonna really then close up the ceiling and then go back and again, open up the ceiling to put in the feed and the return for the cold water, for the cooling? Like, is that a good use of money and a good use of labor? I don't know, right? Now, maybe a good use of it's a different material, but perhaps it's just the same labor. I mean, just incremental labor to just put the 4 instead of the 2. But the real difference here would be not putting the chiller, right? The chiller on the roof. So these are the kinds of things that over the next couple of months I want to explore with the architect, explore with the board to decide in terms of when we do the work. And that was some of the discussion we had previously over in the middle school, because we changed, right? That's going up for approval now. We can hopefully just start this work this summer to change some of the steam to the hot water over in the middle school, the music rooms, the gyms, some of the areas, cafeteria, to convert it from the steam to the hot water. We're also putting in the cooling pipe there as well, because the contractor's going in and it doesn't make sense to do part of the work if you have to open ceilings up and the contractors are going in to mobilize. So that's one of the main decision points that the board is going to have to think about, is that does it make sense with something like East to allow the contractor to put in all the piping, right, to save money in terms of additional labor, but just short of the cooling. So don't put the cooling tower in, which is actually a large expense. It may be about $1 million. So maybe about $1 million of this is the actual cooling component. And if that's the chiller and just connecting to the chiller, maybe that's what we wait on. And again, I just need confirmation from our architect that that is the cost. So if we wanted to break this out and say, okay, we're going to wait on the cooling, wait till we cool everything, all the buildings at the same time, but go forward with laying the foundation for it. Go forward with laying the piping work when you're opening up the ceiling. So I know it's a lot of detail, it's very technical, but that's something where I need to explore a little bit further with John Grillo to determine if the board decides to break out a possible proposition, how that would look. Okay, West Elementary School. Again, playground similar to East, pretty much the same in terms of upgrades. And then the cooling here is very clearly an upgrade because West School has brand new, after Superstorm Sandy, a mechanical ventilation system. So what's interesting there is when you ask questions about, well, when we did the mechanical ventilation at West School after Superstorm Sandy, why didn't the contractor at that point put in the feed and the return for the cooling, put in a different type of cooling coil? We weren't allowed, right? Because we were only allowed to put in the different elements of the building that was there before. And that was something that was explored at the time, was that we couldn't enhance it without them putting in our own money. So we were only able, what was eligible for FEMA was to put in what was had before. The other thing to think about when we talk about air conditioning is that a lot of our buildings already have window units in them because of different situations with classrooms and 504s and whether it's for a teacher or for a student, that it's somewhat deceiving when we talk about this cooling piece, because a lot of our buildings, like a West School or the middle school or even East School, have window units in the buildings already. Again, it's not something what we want to do wholesale, in terms of just having it done that way, because that was something that had come up a couple of years ago. Why not just put window units in all of the buildings? It's because, first of all, our architect wouldn't support that, because it's not a comprehensive way of dealing with the ventilation piece, right? So again, what does an air conditioner do? It takes the air that's in the room, cools it, and spits it back out. So if you just have an air conditioner in the room, sure, you're creating and you're regulating the temperature, but you're not getting ventilation. So when we're talking now in a post-COVID environment here, really it's about the ventilation. So that's really the main part, and that's why when we talk about what's maintenance or what's an upgrade, or, you know, it's about the ventilation more so than the cooling. But I did want to, just to be fair and say that, I don't know the percentage, but maybe 70% of our buildings are already classrooms have window air conditioners in them. Nike, facilities department office, transportation department offices, it's all maintenance. None of it's educational upgrades, very straightforward. So now let's talk a little bit about the context in terms of financing. A large portion of the annual debt service that we're currently paying, right, that's on the books now, is $8 million that we're paying in debt service. If you take a look at the budget, the line by line, and you take a look at all the different line items, you'll see about $8 million is for debt service. 5.4 million of that debt service is going to retire at the end of 25-26. So what that does is it provides an opportunity to the district to take advantage of the fact that our budget now, that line item will be 5.4 million lower. So there's a place there to backfill with other debt service and address some of these items, whether it's a new in-house science research lab at the high school, whether it's addressing some of the softball or baseball fields at the high school, doing something at west, at east, right? It's an opportunity to say, we want to upgrade our educational experience, or we also want to start like addressing some of these maintenance items that have come up in that building condition survey. A couple of years later, at the end of 27, 28, the rest of that, again, all going back to the school preservation plan that was voted on in the spring of 2009. This 2.6 million retires at the end of this school year. Again, the other opportunity. Now, why, this is like an interesting question, financing questions. Why is it two different two-year, let's call it increments here? Is because when you borrow money, you only borrow for what you need. So if we're doing work, let's say the summer of 2026 or summer of 2027, we're only going to borrow the amount that we need to pay our bills for that particular summer. So you can space it out. So when we go forward and we approve a bond issue, we're just approving it in concept. 14 years ago, when the Board of Education put forward a bond issue and the public approved it in 2009, we didn't borrow, right? Until 2000, I think the first borrowing was 2011. Then we borrowed, and 2 years later, we borrowed again. So just because we seek approval at a particular point in time, it doesn't mean that's when we borrow the money. It's something else we'll seek a little bit later, and then it's a year before we have to start paying it back. So the purpose of tonight, again, the purpose of what we've been doing the past few months, and even when we talked about it last year, is just a plan. It's just to really get everybody with a clear understanding and direction of what we want to do, where we want to go, how we want to move forward with it, and plan appropriately. Now, the subcommittee, again, is recommending that we don't do anything this May, for this ballot, for this vote, the May, not put anything on the May ballot, but we still need to talk about it, and we still need to think how we're going to proceed in the future. And it doesn't mean that we're going to do the work next summer because we're talking about it now. We're not going to do the work for another couple of years, because not only do we have to figure out when to put it on the ballot, but then we have to put everything up to the New York State Education Department for approval, and that takes at least a year. And then after that, we go out to bid, and we start planning the work. So this is a really long process. And we're talking about it, and the reason why it's coming up now is because of this opportunity. The debt service is coming off of our books, so to speak. And it's an opportunity to plan to backfill it. So if we stay within this $8 million of annual debt service, it's like the same as the level we have now. And that's why there's no tax impact, because that $8 million placeholder in the budget, it just kind of gets backfilled when these two phases of it drop off. I think I addressed this in terms of the phasing. Last board meeting, we talked about maybe doing short-term borrowing if the board wanted to move forward with a vote this spring. The subcommittee is recommending that we don't move forward. If we're not gonna go forward with a vote on this program this spring, then we don't have to worry about short-term financing. Because by the time there's a vote on it, by the time we get, like I was saying before, get approval from the state education department, by the time we start doing the work, by the time we have to start paying the bills, it's a couple of years from now. We're already in this period here where it drops off. So that's why we don't need short-term borrowing anymore, even if we just delay it 6 months. We have here this point, if the district closes on buying bond financing in the summer of 2025, let's say that's when we start the work, we don't have to begin debt service payments until the following year. Then we're in the next school year, and we're already in 26, 27, we're past 2025, 26. One of the things that I'd like the board to consider is if we do go forward with a bond, maybe next October or the following spring, do we want to have different propositions on the ballot to give voters greater flexibility? So I'm already recommending that we have one ballot proposition that seeks approval of the $5.2 million that we currently have. Maybe by the time it's on the ballot next year, we'll have more. Maybe we'll have 6 or 7 million that we can put towards this program from our own capital reserve fund. That's very clear, it's very easy. We've done that before, and the public has always approved the use of our own money to spend it on these projects. Then we have to decide the balance, and let's just say for argument's sake it's 80 million. Do we want to break it out into 2 subsets? So we really need to think about the strategy there. Do we want to break out somehow with everything that's maintenance or maintenance and the educational upgrades? Do we want to separate out the cooling element? You know, it's something to think about. I can say pros and cons of both. It certainly gives greater flexibility to the voters, but how do you want to categorize it? And I think it depends on the priorities of the board in terms of, well, what if one fails? You know, what if they both or all of them don't pass? Are we going to be comfortable moving forward with that subset of work? Or do we want to take a chance and say, no, if we bundle it all together in that one for the bond financing, then it either sinks or swims on that boat, and maybe it gives a greater chance of everything being included. So that's a strategic point that I'd like the board to consider as we move a little closer to this possible vote. And this addresses this vote here. And I think I talked about this earlier in terms of when we're talking about East, how we do want to tease it out so it's more clear what the expenditures are for the mechanical ventilation, and then what the expenditures are to prepare cooling, right? So kind of lay those piping, let's say, but not having the chiller, because maybe there's an efficiency there. If a contractor is going in and installing 2 pipes to just put 4 and not moving forward with the chiller. So those are kind of some of the details that we're going to be talking about in the next couple of months. I talked a little bit about this last time, about a cost escalation factor. Just what's happening in the world. The more we delay doing anything, we have to anticipate cost increases. If we don't, so we already have 8% built into these numbers. Let's say there's a 10% cost increase across the board 3 years from now when we do the work. We will have to scale back the scope or seek more money. We never really want to do that. We usually scale back the scope. So do we want to agree on a scope that's a little bit smaller and allow for an escalation factor of maybe 3 to 5%, so that if the price is coming lower, great, it's coming lower. We don't have to borrow as much. But we know up front that this is what we expect to do. Or do we take a chance and hope for a larger scope? Maybe the cost will be above 8%, and take the chance, and then if they come in higher, then we say at that point, okay, we're going to have to scale it back. For example, and I'll show you just one thing I had in mind on some of the fields, right? So you take a look at, I'm going to just go to the high school for a second, the baseball and softball field. You know, that's a relatively large number compared to our other projects, about $5.3 million. Maybe there's a way to talk to the architect and say, okay, this would be ideal for our athletes for the baseball and softball fields at the high school, but maybe we can scale it back, I don't know, a number to give more play in case there are cost escalations. And we still need to fill in these numbers, right? So I told you already, we got a pretty good number of $500,000 just for the equipment and changing the service lines out. And we were talking about putting in a balcony at the cafeteria and having different seating just to give it a little bit of variability and dimension instead of having it feel like a long tunnel. But I don't know, maybe we scale something else back so that we have room for these two. And maybe when we meet, it's not going to be that much. So there is a little more exploration we need to do, but going back to the cost escalation factor, it's something to think about. Again, I talked about being tax neutral. As long as we're under 87 million in total borrowing, it won't be any additional tax levy that we have to say to the community we need to support the debt service, because the tax levy to support the 8 million of debt service is already there. We already know we've been paying $8 million in debt service, and we have the levy and the combination of levy and the state aid to support that. So as long as we're within 87 million, it's no new money that we need for the program. It's already there. We already have it as part of the levy. The flip side of this, though, is that if we do go lower, right, then that is room for other things. And that's something the board needs to think about too. Let's say we agree on a scope and it's 80 million a scope. And let's say we put 7 million of our own money to it, right? So now we have a $72 million bond offering. Remember, we have debt service in this budget for 8 million a year. Let's say the debt service comes in at 7.5 million. That's again $500,000 that we have to use for other things. And I know we're talking about programs that are funded now through the ARC grant. So I know it's something to think about in terms of what else may we want to put in the budget in that differential. So that's another strategic point that we need to think about. And this one I talked about already. Okay, I know I spoke for a lot, I'm sorry, but a lot I felt like I wanted to get out. And I know we're not going to talk about this so much over the next few months because we're now going to focus on more of the other elements of the budget. So I wanted to make sure that all these things got it. Thank you for your patience and your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Davida. Questions from the board? On Mr. Davida's presentation?
I don't necessarily have any questions per se. It was very thorough, so thank you, and thank you for explaining it. I think it was easily digestible for everyone. I think we have a lot to talk about as a board. I like that we have more than one option. We have many different options, and ultimately, I think we'll make the right decision for what's best for the kids and for the community, for the taxes. So thank you.
Thank you.
Vince?
One comment, I do appreciate that we are, because we're trying to align this with the debt services falling off, I do like that we're not relying on borrowing with the bond anticipatory note and instead utilizing some reserves in the event that we have to spend the money and we go forward with the projects. One thing, I just double check for clarification, the two projects that are to be determined, those prices are right in the ballpark in that estimate, correct?
No, they're not even in the estimate yet. Yeah,
Okay.
one of them is we were supposed to have a visit. It got rescheduled, and just scheduling hasn't happened for this in-house science lab. And we have some visits at some other school districts that are getting set up now. So we don't have a number there. The other number in terms of to support marine technology was supposed to be on a call again, and it got rescheduled, so the timing hasn't worked for us to put a placeholder in there, unlike the cafeteria.
So even if we go forward with the bond request for capital money, we don't have to specifically do each one of these projects as exactly described. These are just things that were referred to us from the BCS, right?
I'm going to present to you what would be, a comprehensive solution for it, right? So for example, if the high school has a vision for the cafeteria and they said, listen, it's a space kids don't really enjoy being in as well, even though the view is beautiful, they don't gravitate to the cafeteria. And we do some brainstorming and say, well, what if we put like a countertop along the wall that faces the bay, right? So kids can either eat their lunch, talk to a few people, or do work there, and it's comfortable. And then what if we build a balcony, so with comfortable seats where the current service lines are, and then we break up the cafeteria so it's less of this huge rectangle, but them into more discrete spaces with the different service lines and maybe a panini bar or a deli bar, things of that sort, and make it more like a food court, but less of a cavern, we could always scale it back and say, okay, we're not gonna do, let's say, E and F. If I give you A, B, C, D, E, and F, I'm just gonna do A through D. But I'm gonna present to you like a fully executed of the vision, right? And then we could always scale it back in terms of, okay, maybe we don't wanna do that because either we don't wanna borrow as much, or we wanna save some of the room in the budget for other programs that we may, 2 years from now feel like, oh, we wanna fund something.
And a lot of these projects, because they're, for the building, they're subject to getting additional money from the state and building aid.
Yeah, so our eligible amount, if it's aidable, and mostly everything is aidable in the way we package it, is 42 cents on the dollar.
So we're almost getting benefit back in building aid, right?
In general, yes. But again, I just want to do one caveat to that. The 80 million that we have in the budget now for the current debt service, that's partially being offset by current building aid for those projects. So let's just say we did nothing, say, oh, $8 million, that now we can reduce the budget. We'd also have 42% of that revenue that we get in building aid, and I know we went over the building aid that we're getting for next year from the state. We would lose and we will, we're gonna be losing the associated building aid for that debt service. So that's just to be clear, like we do the construction, we backfill the debt service, we get the building aid, it backfills the building aid that we're getting. So
Cool, thank
it's not like an additional building aid, it will keep things low.
A lot of side stepping.
Yeah. Thank you.
That was an exceptional explanation of the building
Thank you.
portion of it. I didn't realize that it came in, I thought the building came in a year or two after we did the construction. But
You know what it is, Mr. Cronin, like it's changed over the years, so when we first started it, when you put in your paperwork to get the permits and you started, like if you started the work, you started getting the building aid, they changed it, so now you have to finish the project, but it's supposed to pretty much correspond with the borrower.
Actually, that's a really great way to do it. Because then you still have to borrow the $80 million because you're not getting the revenue from it until you're.
That's right, that's right.
Okay, I guess my first question is, what are you looking for from the board tonight?
Okay, a couple of things, thank you. Either an acceptance of the subcommittee's recommendation to wait. I mean, again, it's the full board's decision. Subcommittee's recommending that we wait on going forward with the bond buy. There was some discussion about possibly going forward with it on this May's ballot. So we'd like the full board to say either they'd like to go forward or wait. We don't have to make a decision on whether it's going to be October or next May or future May or never. We don't have to do that. So that's the first question, is we want to wait. And then I would like consensus from the board that you like the program that's being presented here, that you want us to continue to talk about an in-house science research lab, to talk about putting some green spaces at East and West, to talk about putting turf over at the high school in the baseball and the softball areas, and to address the needed repair and maintenance. Now, we've always, every year, when we talk about capital projects, there are items in it that have to do with repair and maintenance, and something maybe that's an educational enhancement. So I'm not saying if we don't move forward with a bond, that we're not gonna do that. But for right now, we don't have any plans to do anything in this budget for the 23-24 budget for capital at this point. We're gonna say we're good. Listen, we had $11.3 million last year that the board approved. Money we had, right? You approved it. We're waiting for approvals. We're gonna do work this summer, right? We're doing the steam to hot water conversion over here in the middle school. There are a lot of other projects that we're gonna be busy working on next summer. So it's just consensus that, no, we're gonna wait, but we like the direction you're going in. We like some of the educational enhancements. We wanna keep talking about air conditioning. We wanna keep talking about ventilation. We wanna plan for the next 5 years to deal with these repair items and maintenance items. So keep going, further develop this, and come back to the board with, again, our best vision of what that looks like. And then the board can say, yeah, we want to go forward with a vote or no. Or we want to go forward with a vote on a scaled down version. and what that would look like.
Okay,
Does that answer your question?
oh, yeah, sure
Okay,
does.
okay.
Makes my life a lot easier. So, as you can probably tell from my comments at the last meeting, I'm thrilled that you're not thinking about putting it up for the bond vote for this May of 2023. So I obviously am in favor of that. I also am, but I have two caveats there. I'm not in favor of the board recommendation, the subcommittee recommendation that you do it in the fall. I think it's just, for lack of a better word, I don't know the good right word, and I used wrong words last time, so I won't. I just think people expect the school district vote to be in May, and everybody is aware that that's when it is, and if we want to have some propositions, we should put them on at the same time as our budget vote. People are not thinking about school district votes in September. By October, maybe even September, some of our population is gone. So I just think, in terms of fairness and equity to the whole community, that it should always be as part of the May vote. Okay, so my question is, vis-a-vis this coming year, when we're gonna have a tax increase after we've had a 0% tax levy for 3 years running now, so we understand inflation is rampant, we're gonna have a tax increase this year. My question is, why are we not putting a proposition on this May for permission to use the $5.2 million that we have in capital reserve? So such that we could get whatever work we deem most critical started. I mean, you had said to me, you and Mr. Grillo said to me last time that you felt like the first part of it would only be 10 million. Now, the way I look at it, Joe, I'm sure you'll disagree, is you get 5.2 million from capital reserve, and then we're getting an additional million in state aid So I'm thinking, already you're at $6.2 million, go for it and run. I'm sure you have other plans for that $1 million in state aid. But even with half of the money, that would get you started. And it's not like we would be asking the voters to vote on anything. All we'll be asking for when we're taking money out of our reserve, as you taught me, is to spend money that we already have. So why wouldn't we want to do that?
You're comfortable with me answering that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So,
How come you didn't answer me when I asked you this question?
So our subcommittee talked about that, and it was something I suggested at the last meeting. And I think what came to light when we had our last subcommittee meeting was that if we put a ballot proposition, again, as we clearly understand, to spend 5.2 million of money we already have on hand this May, if we go back in October, right, that was a consideration, maybe going back in October, they get, wait a second, you just had something for capital projects on 5.2 million. Now you want to put on for 78 million or 83 million for a bond? Like, wait a second, what's going on here? Like, and there was a concern that it would be misunderstood, that what we needed to go forward to the community and ask for approval of a bond, that it would be more powerful to use our money, like to put towards it at the time and say, listen, the whole scope of the program is 85 million. We're gonna put 5 million of our own money, again, the money we have on hand towards it, and we're gonna finance through a long-term bond, 80 million or 79 million. They thought it would just be more powerful to do it that way.
Okay, so if it's $83 million and we have $5 million, that takes it down to 78, right? So you're only now looking for a bond vote on 78, because you keep saying 79, 80.
Well, you know what, because again, I left out the public library. Public library is
No, because
1.2.
it was I looked that up while you were speaking.
Okay,
Because it's 83 and
Right.
change today, it was 1.4 million more.
right,
So that's over 84. So
Right.
today you're saying it's 83, forget the library.
right.
And so you take the 5 away. So we're looking to have a bond vote for 78 million?
Again, the reason why I'm using round numbers is because we don't have the in-house science lab in that figure yet.
And that, more than anything, that and the microbiology,
Right.
marine biology, and we don't know what's gonna cost to parse out the AC at each school, and the library, we don't know what's ours and what's, it just seems like there are so many things that are undetermined now that we haven't yet figured out how much they're gonna cost or where we're gonna go with them. So that's why I'm wondering why we spent the last two, that's why I asked you what you wanted from us. What is the rush with this if we don't even know what we want to borrow yet?
Okay, two things. If I felt that the inclination of the subcommittee was to move forward with a ballot proposition this May, Mr. Grillo would have had the information for us for tonight. So a few weeks ago when we met, and it was the consensus of the subcommittee that we're not going to recommend that we go forward, I told Mr. Grillo that he had more time to put those figures together. But in all honesty, if the recommendation was to move forward, you would have had that all fleshed out.
So if you're gonna move forward in September, so you're looking for the board to make decisions on September or for the fall?
No, it would, again, if we're gonna go forward in October, we're gonna talk about it probably in May, right? Again, fairness before the summer, about, okay, this is what we're looking for in October or November, right? Sometimes they're November, right?
That was
October.
so unfair. There's so many people that are snowbirds by November. Is that what we're doing?
No. I mean, I'm just
All
looking,
right.
just saying that.
Let's just keep that in mind though,
Yeah.
when we start to plan these things, that we want our entire community
Right.
to be a part of this.
Sure. No, we would definitely
don't
be
want us
mindful of that.
unfairly.
Yeah, I just didn't want to get locked into October if the board decides. that they
So
want
is
to.
one of the options before the board to have this be on the 2024 May?
Sure.
Okay. Now, let's assume for a minute that it was on May 2024.
Right.
When would you start to borrow money? If you get a bond passed in May of 24, when would you start to spend money?
So if all goes well, and we get all the state approvals, so that we can begin some of the work,
May 25.
May 25. Contract will go out to bid, we're happy, accept the bid, everything's in good order, right? We feel good about it, and start work summer 2025. Let's say our first invoices are due in October, I would borrow the money in July, right? Have a closing, let's say by mid-July, so we know we have the money in our bank accounts to pay the bills. Not the whole amount though, because we know we're only
No,
gonna,
I'm
yeah,
not
percent.
saying the whole
Yeah,
thing again.
yeah.
All right, so you borrow the first of the money in July of 25.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you don't pay any, you borrow that money from July of 25 until July of 26 without paying a dime on it?
That's right. We have
No
a year.
interest?
We have a year before our first debt service payment, and
How
because,
come we don't get that on our home mortgages?
I don't know.
We get 30 days on your home mortgage.
But,
Mortgage payments.
and what works out well for us in terms of the work, the construction work done in the summer, right, July, is that now we're in a new fiscal year, right? So now it's the new fiscal year, it's that new budget, and that debt service falls off. That's why the timing in terms of.
But that, okay,
Yeah.
okay, so then let's take it back. Let's go back to October of 24.
Right,
You do the same process.
right,
October of 24,
October
and
20,
then to October of 25.
well, October 24, we'll probably miss summer of 2025.
What?
If we seek the approval in October of 2024,
Right.
I don't think we're gonna get summer of 2025 because the drawing's not gonna go up to the state until probably New Year's. And 5 months is not enough time to get all the approvals.
I meant October of 23. I'm sorry.
Okay, so October,
Wait, you do this October? is that
yeah,
what
2023,
you're talking
yeah,
about? Okay, so then you get all your approvals
Right.
by October of 2024.
Yeah.
And then when do you start?
same summer. I mean, there may be certain things that,
So when would you borrow the first money? If you did the bond vote in October of 23,
yeah, I got you,
when would you borrow your first money?
same. But if we were able to do the 5.2 million, we have that part of it on hand already. If we wanted, let's say there was something we can do during the school year. Most of the stuff we can't do during the school year. Let's say there was something that we can do, again, it's winter, right, so we can't do. Let's say there's something we can start in May. You know, April, May, when the weather breaks. We have 5.2 million already on hand. We've already got approval to spend our own capital reserve fund. We don't have to borrow for that. So we can phase it, right? And that's why these things are complicated. I'm sorry, I hope I'm being clear. You know, it's very complicated in terms of how you phase it, you know, the different elements. There's the approvals, there's the state education department filing, there's going out to bid, and to time it all in a way, and then the cash flow to phase it so that you only borrow what you need, depending on when you're gonna do the work, knowing that most of the work is done in the summer, right? So this may be like multi-year, like 3 years of work of a big program of this nature, because most of the work is gonna get done during the summer. So if we start the work in summer 2025, then we do more of it in summer 2026. We may need still summer 2027 to do the work. And my whole point in this was that, and again, not rushing it and being mindful of the board subcommittee, the sooner we kind of reach closure on it and plan for it, then we know, okay, well, we have our vote, whether it's October or whether it's the following May. We start doing the design, get it into the pipeline for the New York State Education Department. Who knows what kind of projects they're going to get? At least let's try to do some of the work in summer 2025 and not miss another year. And that's all my whole point in all of this and why we're talking about this, is that if at least we have a good plan that we can work backwards and say, when do we want to start the work? When can the community expect to see new fields that we're talking about, new playgrounds, ventilation, air, whatever it is? It just helps us manage those expectations and get things going.
Okay, I've been talking far too long, so I'm just gonna answer your questions. I agree that we should not have bond vote in May of 23. I disagree that we should have it in the fall of 23. I believe that we should, if we're gonna do it, we should have it in May of 24. I find it difficult now to tell you, of course, I like the direction of maintenance is maintenance and we have to do it. Enhancements are a beautiful thing, but I don't know that we can afford it. I don't, because there's so many big things in there that are undecided to me, or that I don't know.
Okay.
And I like direction in general, but would I vote for an $87 million bond? I don't know. I do want to say that we as a board had made a decision that when we went out for a bond, in part to air condition our buildings, that we wanted to air condition all of our elementary schools at the same time, that it was inequitable to be air conditioning some while not air conditioning others. And the reason I was mumbling while you were talking about Westville after FEMA is I get it. When they opened up the floor, they only put in the hot water because that's all that FEMA was paying for. You said that's all we were allowed to do. No, that's all that FEMA was paying for. We, as a district, with the handful of Westville parents who at the time were sitting in the audience, begging you to put the piping in for the air conditioning as well. So it wasn't done, but it wasn't done. FEMA didn't say, no, you can't put those pipes in for the cold air. They just didn't pay for it.
I just wanted to let you know, Ms. Rowe, that it just gets complicated with FEMA when you try to separate out, well, what's the money to put it back in the place where it was and to move forward with those project worksheets and to say, well, this is money that we're going to add to it. And, it was a hard time, and I'm sure you remember, we're trying to recover from the storm and all the damage and trying to get everything in the proper order to reopen. And at that point, the impetus was reopen, it was a whole year for West School. And then to get the money, and I have to look back at my notes to see what we even had available to then get a public vote on it, it would have delayed everything, and then it possibly could have delayed the reopening of West.
Right. So anyway, that's why I don't want to get distracted.
Okay.
My point is, I still agree with that position, though. We should, if we're going to do air conditioning, if we can only do one space, it should be the middle school, because all of our students attend there, and that all elementary schools. And the last thing is, I think that I think it's more palatable to the community to put up a capital reserve permission slip proposition this May, or whenever you want to put it up, then rather than put it on with a bond vote that has two other propositions already, potentially, I think that that's where you're going to get more confusion. So that's all I have. Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. DeVito, thank you so much for your thorough presentation and for answering all of our questions
Thank you.
thoroughly and in detail. I'd like to thank everyone on the subcommittee who has worked diligently with Mr. DeVito, Mr. Miller, Mr. Pinto. Thank you so much for all of your time and effort. This is still a work in progress in the way that, because as a committee, we really haven't decided, just like you said, what we're going to upscale, what we're going to downscale and such. So we're still looking into those finer details. And Mr. Grillo is going to provide us, as we discussed, some visual aids so people can see, our community can see that these upgrades are really going to benefit all of our students, and therefore that it's going to benefit our community. Correct?
Yeah, when you're done, just want to just response.
No, when we're sitting there talking about all of the capital gains and looking at all the money, it's a lot of money, but as you said, we don't have to spend everything. And we're still looking into what exactly we want to create. But when we talk about flooding, and we talk about the rains, and then we look at a turf field, well, baseball games can't play because the fields are flooded. So what do you do time and time again when, the lacrosse field is fine because it's turf, and then the baseball players are there sitting in the rain? So you have to consider different options and different things. And mind you, that's just one minor piece of it. We talk about the upgrades to the cafeteria. You're right. The students, they don't want to be in the cafeteria. You want to make it more inviting. We've been talking about making the food service lines more inviting for years. And that's for our students, for their nutritional value, so they have a place to sit and to talk with one another, where they're comfortable, where they're not going all around the school looking for a place to sit with their friends. So these are things that we know will benefit our students. So I know we've talked about this at length. I just wanted to put my 2 cents in, and thank you so much, Mr. DeVito, for your time.
Questions, First, concerning the reconstruction of that for each school. Before you do that, my recollection serves that we did it once before.
We did.
On the table for 85,000. So how do we make the determination of whether our own guys can do it or whether we have to send them?
So it depends on the scope of work, and I'm going to defer to Mr. Kramer if you know, in terms of we're talking about, we always try to do our work in-house, wherever we can. This type of gut renovation, perhaps it's beyond the scope of our staff. Do you remember in discussions about this line item, why this was something that we had discussed seeking an outside contractor for? Right here. At your school.
You read it to me, Mike?
Sure. It's renovate existing bathrooms adjacent to the existing gymnasium. The work will be a full gut replacement in kind. They will remain single-stall toilets as there's no room to expand.
Right, so we're talking about putting pre-K down near that kindergarten wing. And these 2 existing bathrooms are in awful condition. We can see that the pipes coming through the wall are ready to give out at any time. They're just very old, very tired. They need to be redone.
No, but the question is why can't our in-house people?
So the scope of this work is beyond what our guys can really handle.
Right.
We need to bring in specialists,
So
plumbing,
what they
tile workers, and
So what they did the last time they worked there, what was the difference in scope in terms of?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I know what you're talking about. It was on the north side of the building when they did it. I just have to let you know.
Okay, my other concern is just where I stand on this, maybe to give you some clarity, because I haven't really. I sort of agree with Mrs. Verona. I think it'd be too much confusion for the community to have that vote in November. There's a city vote then in terms of city council, and I think people can only bear so much in terms of elections and confusion and who's on first type of thing. So I don't see any need to create any more confusion in the general public in terms of that. And my other concern is just in terms of my own need to understand this, because it's certainly, I don't have any expertise in any area related to the school construction or maintenance. But, we do have a responsibility to keep the buildings in shape, and buildings are, subject to the elements. And Lindell is 90 years old, and the high school and middle school are 50, and East is over close to 100, and West is no baby either. So just common sense tells us that given the wear and tear, that we can't just perpetuate, move along and hope that they don't sustain leaks, they don't sustain damage. It's our responsibility to keep them in shape. But concerning air conditioning, now my understanding, and I could very well be wrong here, is that when we talked about this, and we talked about ventilation, particularly in the last meeting, that the two sort of go hand in hand. My mother used to say you can't spend good money after bad. And I was making the inference in terms of the last time that if we do the ventilation, it's much easier to do the air conditioning with that rather than trying to do the one without the other. That it makes good sense, and it's actually best practice to do them both at the same time. So is that, am I correct?
So I'd like to respond to that.
Please.
After reflecting on that point and trying to really dig into it, let's say for East, for example, if they're going up and putting in the ventilation and they're running 2 pipes, right, a feed and a return for the hot water, to me, it makes sense, the guy's up there already, right, to just do the other, because the additional labor to go back and put another fee in return for the cooling system, to me, is not. But we don't have to spend the money and put the chiller on the roof. We don't have to do that connection. So that's the kind of information that I have a better understanding of from the last meeting in terms of how do you dig into this number. Now, I'm not able to provide you with, clear figures, but I do know maybe it's $1 million, maybe $1.5 million out of this that we can parse out and say, no, that's cooling, right? That's cooling for Lindell and cooling for West, that's separate. But the ventilation part, being that East doesn't have mechanical ventilation, while all the other buildings do, is something that you may want to address at a different time. And if we are going in, maybe you lay the piping, right? Which is a little different from where we are with the middle school, right? Because when we did and sought the approval from the board and the community to do the conversion from steam to hot water, which now we're getting permits, right? So hopefully we'll do that work this summer. Over in the middle school, we said air conditioning, right? Because it's the middle school. All of our students would use the middle school. So it's nuanced, right? And last year we said, do the middle school, do the air conditioning of those spaces, because all of our students are gonna have it. But the elementary schools, there's a way to wait. There's a way to segregate out some of these costs, right? And put it as two separate. So, but still, at least lay the foundation work for it, so that when we do cool it, it's easier to just do that, and it's not going back into spaces that we were just in the previous summer.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Just moving along, two other items I have, this one is the doors in the middle school. Every year when we do our building inspection, in the summer, I go through the doors, and the doors are certainly in need of some beautification. To me, it's sanding and refinishing, and while we have industrial art, yeah, but I don't know, why could that never have been done?
No, I think we've been doing it gradually.
I don't see it, maybe I don't see it, if you leave this building and go down here into the middle school,
Okay.
you'll see 5 doors that are in desperate need of some kind of, I'm gonna use the word beautification.
No, I
Sanding, refinishing, making it just look better. If you go through the middle school, there are countless doors, I remember going through with you, Mr. Pinto, when we went through the holiday time after the concert, just putting this up, we discussed this.
Right.
That I just don't know why, but it needs to be done, there's no question about it.
So Dr. Ryan, I'd like to get back to you on that and to talk to our facility staff and determine what has been done and what can we do short of a lot, right, to address it.
And my last concern is just, I see that there's, for me, no question in terms of the need for astroturf in middle school and high school fields, because the volume of play that goes there. But I'm not so sure we need astroturf at the elementary school, and that's a concern I have. So I'm just using tonight to sort of educate myself, to give you a sense, the superintendent a sense, Mrs. Conway, Mr. Pinto, Ms. Pace, Ms. Verona a sense of where I am with this. Because the more we talk about it, the better I feel about it. I certainly feel a little bit more educated, but I'm certainly still remedial in terms of my need to know. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan.
So do I hear from the board that you would like the committee to go back and discuss this in further detail, or should we just leave it as is for now?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the issues I raised, Mr. DeVito, if you could get back to us in terms of those. I think maybe if we could have some consensus, I think the district clerk would like some consensus in terms of the ballot, what the ballot's gonna look like, in terms of the 2 board members that basically expressed whether we're gonna have it in May or postpone it in terms of May. So I think we could maybe, take a small step in that regard and check that off the list if there's consensus among us. I think it's incumbent on us to do that tonight as we gradually move through this project. So my proposal would be, 2 people said, May's not a good time, maybe we could put that up in some kind of a vote or give some kind of closure on that. It's one step towards closure.
So put it up for this May, Doc?
No, I'm saying, no, people have said
Not for
not
this
to vote this May. I have said not to do it in November, I think Mrs. Rowland said not in November as well.
May.
So those 2 things are on, so we could give them some direction in that respect. It is progress in some respect.
So for next May then, would you like to put it on for next May so we would have time as a committee to discuss it.
Well, I think at the very least, it is consensus of the board not to move forward this May on the bond vote, but Mrs. Roman did raise a point. She said that she wouldn't mind if there was a ballot proposition on this ballot for the 5.2 million.
Not only would I
Okay.
not mind, I'd like it.
Okay, for the
So
5.2,
we put it on the ballot this May for the 5.2, so we can use our capital reserves now.
that's right. But again,
And then we can
you,
wait for the bond vote, so we can
at a
discuss it.
future time, right? But I know that, you and Mr. Pinto did feel uncomfortable with doing that, and I expressed that, about perhaps, Mrs. Goins taking a different point, different viewpoint on that.
Maybe it's different though, if we don't put the bond on until May of '24, then you don't have the concern that you had, right? Because you had a concern that you were gonna ask for money to use your own money in May and then again in October. So instead it would be in May, use your own money, and then following year borrow the money.
What do you think?
Sounds good.
That sounds good to me too. I agree.
So put something on for this ballot?
Just ballot, use the capital reserves, and then we'll
Okay,
figure out the rest of the time
okay.
And that'll actually give us more time
to get better stuff.
to look at this, right, and get better information.
Sure.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Vito. Student organization announcements. Questions and comments from the public on tonight's agenda only. When you speak, please go up to the podium and state your name and address. Okay, treasurer's report for December 2022. Again, Mr. Vito, thank you so much for that transparency with the treasurer's report. May I have a motion for the approval of minutes for the executive session of January 3rd, 2023, executive session and regular meeting of January 10th, 2023, an executive session and work session meeting of January 24th, 2023. Any discussion? Motion, second?
Second.
All in favor? Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Pace? Yes. Ms. Verona? Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Presentations of the superintendent?
I'd like to ask the board to consider both certificated and non-certificated matters together, both as amended. And the only amendment is that non-certificated 2A should actually be in certificated. Non-certificated 2A should be in certificated.
Make a motion to accept as amended.
Second. Any discussion? Dr. Ryan?
Yes, I have discussion. I'd like to abstain on 1K. And I'd like to ask specifically if two teachers teaching the after-school activities, is that stipend split? Yeah, how stipend split, because we'll get $79. That's specifically about 1K.
Yeah, they're not teaching it together, they alternate.
Okay, so there's only one person who's paid $79.
That's
Okay.
Any other discussion? Dr. Ryan?
I vote yes because I abstain on that.
Ms. Pace?
Yes, that's me.
Ms. Verona?
Yes.
Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes, and I would also like to thank Mrs. Michelle Bennett, Ms. Julie Muirhead for their years of dedication to our students. We wish them the best in their retirement.
I'd ask the board to consider items 3 and 4 together.
May I have a motion? Second? Any discussion?
Yeah, was there any risk of discharges in terms of holidays?
Yeah, the big wrinkle for next year is Easter and Passover are a month apart. So we had to separate out those two holiday breaks. And we elected to follow both BOSI's calendar and the calendar of most of the other districts in the county. Because otherwise that runs into problems with attendance and staffing.
Any other discussion? Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Pace?
Yes.
Ms. Verona?
Yes.
Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
I'd ask the district clerk to read the resolution for item number 5.
Resolved, the Board of Education hereby denies the January 31st, 2023 appeal of the superintendent's decision in connection with a superintendent's hearing for a student discussed in executive session and referred to as student A.
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Pace? Yes. Ms. Verona? Yes. Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
And I ask the board to consider items 6 through 15 together.
We have a motion?
Motion.
Second? Second. Any discussion? I just have a question. When are we gonna get a new toilet? Number 8.
So the new boilers were part of the steam to hot water conversion that the board approved and appropriated and the community approved last May.
Right.
And we're seeking approval from the education department. Hopefully, if all goes well, we'll start that work perhaps before the heating season next year. If all goes well, we haven't gotten approval yet. I had put it in, mentioned to the board that we did get approval on moving forward with the bathrooms at the high school. We're really excited about that. And hopefully the boiler and that whole steam hot water conversion will come shortly, but I don't know when.
Not yet. All
That's-
right, thank you. Any other discussion? Dr. Ryan?
Oh, yes.
Ms. Pace? Yes. Ms. Verona?
Yes.
Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
I would like to just welcome and congratulate two of our new clerical moving into new positions in the district, Ms. Jamie Calkin and Ms. Aileen Monahan.
Any other new or old business? I would just like to mention something. I went to the Adult Learning Center this week, and I have to say, Ms. Reddick is really quite amazing. The students were engaged, very excited. What she's done over there is just wonderful, and she's offering plethora of services to members of our community. So I really want to extend my thanks to her. Any other Board of Education comments? Questions and comments from the public? Wait, no, old and new. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Brown.
As much as I'm tired of talking, I just have a couple of really fast questions. I noticed that in the Seal of Civic Readiness, we have 75 students participating this year. Is this still a pilot program with the state?
No.
Okay, so it was a pilot program last year and now it's like up and running?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm kind of wondering, because it's a social studies program, why only 75 kids are doing it?
Well, it's optional, but and there are several components to it. Course components.
Dr. Oster, I don't know if you know the components off the top of your head, community service. We encourage as many students as possible to do it, but it's not necessarily something that every student aspires to.
Okay, are we encouraging our students to do it?
Yeah, of course, we have one of the biggest groups in the state last year.
Okay.
And Ms. Sierra has visited all the classes to talk about it. I've watched her in action, and so she's definitely spelling it out to the students. She also is adopting a new app, and we're hoping also makes it a little more accessible and transparent to students, where they can track their progress towards the Seal of Civic Readiness. There's a lot going on in all of that program. Thank you. Thank you, Brad.
Okay, I also noticed that we're ending virtual high school tutoring. I know that a year ago, we spent a lot of time talking about high school tutoring and tweaking the system so that more of our kids could partake it, could take advantage of it. So I'm wondering why we're ending the virtual high school tutoring.
So we're suspending it temporarily because of poor attendance. And you may remember this thing happened last year. I think our testing times, the attendance ramps up, but we were having teachers waiting virtually to see the students at home. So after looking at that, certainly to be fiscally responsible, we're ending it for now, but we're going to restart it again around, a few weeks before we reach this conversation.
Excellent, okay. And a little bit distressing to me, is it true that 50% is going to be passing on Regents again this year?
That's correct.
Why?
That's not my decision, because we'll get it.
Oh my goodness, okay. Last thing is, I hear that there's been some issues at the middle school with a flooded field that is potentially damaging stuff, or at least bubbling over onto the neighboring property. What's going on with that? Is it a problem? Is it?
But it's always a low spot in the complex is the field over there. We've always had problems with flooding. It's never been as bad as it was recently with some rain, so we believe that there's some sort of a clog in the pipe, but what we're not clear about is it on our property, is it on other property, golf course, because it is a drainage pipe that goes out to the bay. So the good news is that I was in touch with Denise Ford last week. She was able to get somebody to come down to the district tomorrow from the town of Hempstead, and they're gonna call me and let me know when they're here so that our staff members can meet them there and just start the exploration process in terms of getting a camera down there, seeing where the problem is. Now, it's not damaging our property, you know, in the sense that, not damaging, it hasn't gone to anybody else's property, but we really wanna fix it before it even gets close to that. And we've been in touch with the residents who are on Harvard Drive and just letting them know we're working on it, and just so pleased that the town of Hempstead, someone from the building department is coming down tomorrow.
Excellent, thank you. That's all I have.
Can I just ask a quick question regarding the tutoring? You know, you said it's suspended until spring. When it comes back, is it still going to be virtual, or is there, will it be in person?
I believe it will be virtual still. Yeah, the reason it's virtual is it's at 7 or 8 o'clock at night.
Just want to clarify, thank you.
Questions and comments from the public? Announcements, Long Beach Classroom Teachers Association. Administrative Supervisory and PPS Group.
Yes.
Yay. When you got up, I didn't know if you had like scripts for
And
everybody.
that's all, that's all. Hi, good evening, Keith Hayes, I'm president of ASPPG. First of all, congratulations to Ms. Muirhead and Ms. Bennett and Ms. Miller on their retirement, and wish them the best of luck. I saw June in middle school, and she was very excited about her retirement. Also, thanks to Ms. Tercey, the sixth grade students, sixth grade science teachers for all their hard work and dedication and their presentation this evening. Even middle school, it's wonderful to see their work in the classrooms. I just want to say congratulations to them. And I'm going to have Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Help yourself to some gifts. Steve? PTA? Okay, have fun and everybody have a great night. A motion to adjourn. Motion, second? David?
Yeah, birthday,